All right, welcome back to another episode of Culture Camp. We have a really fun one for you all today. This is Culture Camp and Potentia. Leigh, Quinn, David Spader, thank you for being on the show.
It's great to be back.
Great to be with you guys.
This has been one of the most fun series. I know everybody out there is enjoying it. I'm very, very excited for what we have going on today because it is one of my favorite subjects. I know we talk about DISC and personalities and assessments a lot, but I feel like this one is not talked about as much as the others, and I feel like it is extremely important. And that subject today is adaptability. And so, David, I want to ask you, what is adaptability?
It's a great question because it's a term that's out there and used very broadly or very narrowly. So, one of the first things that's really important is when you hear someone talking about adaptability is how do they define it? And so, the way we define it is composed of two larger components. So, the first part is more about your attitude around change, obstacles, and ambiguity. So it's not always just has to be something change. It can be you hit an obstacle, you hit a roadblock, something like that. And being adaptable is figuring out different ways around it, right? And so that first component of flexibility is about your attitudinal openness, responsiveness, willing to listen, but it's primarily around, am I willing to even engage in this change or this obstacle that I have? The second component then is versatility. So versatility composes different talents and traits that allow us to actually respond effectively to the change. So one is willingness to change, the other is actual ability to change. And
Right.
so what we find is some people are really willing to change. They'll try anything. They're open to lots, but they can't deliver. They can't back it up on the rubber meets the road. And the flip side is also true. Some people are highly resistant to change, but are actually really good at it when push comes to shove and they've got to do it or their back's against the wall. Okay, so it's those two. And within those two, there's actually 20 behaviors. There's 10 flexibility behaviors we've been researching for well over 30 years now. And the interesting thing is they haven't changed that much. Okay, those factors haven't. They're still critical when you take this broader view of adaptability. So 10 flexibility components, 10 versatility components to help us understand whether we can change. So that's when we're talking about adaptability. That's what we're talking about, both the willingness and ability to overcome obstacles, ambiguity, change, ambiguous situations, and respond effectively to those. What did I miss, Leigh?
No, you covered that great. I think the thing I'd add, which you started out with too, David, is a lot of people rely, as we've talked about, Jason, on the disc, and they rely on one's style or personality. Well, adaptability is what really tells me what's one's willingness to change and ability to change in an environment. So David and I have had the question asked many a time, and Jason, you've asked it as well, is what style is the best style? We said it earlier on in the series, there is no best style.
Right.
It's a style that's most willing and able to adapt appropriately to the situation. That is the best. It's the most adaptable leader, not the style. So to me, that is something that David's brought home many a time. And then when you combine that with a team, now you get an interesting set of dynamics. And especially when you think of organizational change.
Right.
But fundamentally, for David and for me and for anybody else out there as a consultant, this is where you separate yourself from really providing great value to your client and for your client and with your client.
Right.
Because now they can see in a broader scope, as well as be introspective on themselves.
Right.
Right? Because I might have a certain self view of how adaptable I am, but the perception of my team might be totally different.
Right. So if I'm going in and I'm going to potentially be consulting with a company or a group, is there a specific person that like I need to be focusing on to identify their adaptability, or is it the entire, like, everybody needs to be able to be aware, I guess, because the assessments are being aware of how adaptable you really are or you think you are. So if I'm going in, who am I working with first?
Well, that's a great question, Jason, and I'll start with it starts at the top. Okay, because and we know this from research going back several years, actually into the 80s, that the highest performing organizations have unusually adaptable leaders at the very top that guide adaptable organizations. So you can imagine if the entire organization is adaptable, but the CEO is not, what's likely to happen? They're unintentionally a blocker, right?
Right.
But instead, you have those unusually adaptable people. And what do? They help the people around them become more adaptable. They model those behaviors. I was just reading some research it was, I'll remember which one it was, Harvard, Harvard or McKinsey. And they were talking about the fact that if you add psychological safety to adaptable people, you get like 3 to 6x innovation.
Wow.
Okay. And so if that, psychological safety and adaptability suddenly aren't nice things, then they're core strategic capabilities in your organization. And I know Leigh's worked with a lot of organizations too, and talking about how he likes to work with adaptability and where you like to start. Leigh, maybe you can give us an example.
Well, for me, to build on your point, David, is it has to start at the top, right? And the CEO has to be the one to role model the behavior. Otherwise, everybody else is going to model what they see as important from that level going down. And then subsequently, the executive team that works as the colleagues with the CEO needs to demonstrate that as it filters down.
Right.
But the most important thing that I've enjoyed doing is putting a team together and showing them their strengths from a style perspective, and then showing them their strengths from a flexibility and versatility perspective for adaptability. So, for example, if an organization is dealing with a rapid change, and from a standpoint of flexibility, Jason, when you think of open to others, being approachable, being responsive, and being growth motivated, those would be factors that one would consider very, very important, right? And that's on the flexibility side. Well, I've had teams, and so had David, is open and responsive to new ideas. And the biggest thing is a major change, and it's low. Open and objective to others' ideas, and it's low. And then when you take a look at it from the versatility side, especially dealing with change, their foresight and vision of what to do next is low. And then they act on new ideas outside of their comfort zone is low.
Right.
How well do you think they're going to be on implementing a major change?
Not at all.
Right.
Wow.
So and then you have the team, if done well with the CEO buying in on this, you have the team do a self-evaluation. You can't do all this, but if you're going to improve something around your flexibility, improve something around your versatility, what do you think would be the best and have the greatest impact for you to move forward in your change? And the team will come up with it.
Right. That's interesting. In all of your, consulting, Leigh, and, I know you guys both have done, a lot of consulting, but Leigh, in your experience, oftentimes you're working with businesses trying to either scale, they have growing pains, they're trying to have more organizational structure, they're trying to get to, 10x their bit, whatever they're trying to do. I would imagine that you're consulting them because they want to improve in what they're doing. Have you seen a company get to their goal or get from A to Z without being adaptable?
No, I've seen them. Well, let me put it this way. What I see them do is within a year and a half to 2 years on the change initiative or strategic plan they have, they decide to change it because they think that's the problem.
Right.
And what happens in the middle of the organization, for all the people doing all the work, they're just sitting there going, this too shall pass. So they're waiting for whatever is going to happen. Either somebody gets moved out of a position or there is a whole reorg or a whole redesign to the plan. However, they're diagnosing the root cause incorrectly.
Right. Right.
David would speak very well to this. I'm going to hand this over to David, but it's truly diagnosing and helping the CEO and helping the team understand what's important and critical to be successful in whatever strategic change or organizational change they're trying to accomplish.
Right.
Yeah, and
It's interesting.
it's interesting, Jason, that you asked, where do you start and where is it important?
Right.
Different
Right.
questions.
Right.
Yeah.
So, where do you start at the top? And when we've tried to, and we've made this mistake before, gone in and tried to work at the middle out, it doesn't work. Because if you have people that aren't adaptable up the chain of command, it's going to be a problem. So, I've been reading a lot lately about AI adoption and what are we going to do with the AI revolution that's here. I won't even say coming anymore. It's here, whether we're ready for it or not.
Yeah.
And so there's a word that keeps popping up now that Leigh and I have been talking about for years. It's adaptability.
Right.
And things like resilience is a component, and people talk about grit and all these different things. Well, those are parts of adaptability. Okay. And so putting those together is important, because one of the interesting components, that I was working with a colleague who had done a lot of work around just resilience and the ability to stick to an idea and, tough it out. And they said, yeah, that's the most important thing, to be adaptable. I said, well, that's interesting, but that makes a really important assumption. The assumption is you're right.
Right.
What if you stick with the wrong thing for too long?
Right.
It actually does more damage, the fact that you're super resilient, if you don't have vision and foresight, if you're not open to other ideas, if you're not seeing patterns as they change. So really, in one way, I like to think that, I think Jim Collins talked a lot about it in his research from Good to Great. And that technology is really an accelerator. It's an accelerator of what's likely to happen anyway. And so organizations that, like Leigh said, are striving for these, we've got a new AI strategy, it's going to fix all the issues in our organization. Well, that's a process that's going to just accelerate what was likely to happen anyway. Because if they're investing in the wrong solution in the wrong way, it's going to erode the trust of their employees. It's one of the more important concepts that I saw was, it's more important than ever for leaders to be adaptable, particularly with regards to their employees. Because when is it most important to be adaptable? When things are going well or when they're not? Unfavorable. It's unfavorable, right? And so what happens when we're in unfavorable? Do we go to a stress state or a comfort zone?
Stress zone.
We go to our stress zone. So adaptability is most important then, but when are we most likely to be at our best? Not typically when we're in a stress state.
Right.
So right now, what are millions of employees across the world worried about taking their jobs right now? AI. And so an article I was reading recently said some organizations are proudly putting an AI bot on their organizational structure and sharing it with their entire organizations. Well, that's not very good foresight, because what happens when all the people that work around that chat bot look at that? What do they see? They're going to replace me with some agentic chat bot or AI agentic something, right?
Right.
And so that's creating a lot of stress and negative energy right now. And I would argue that that's a leader that's not fully adaptable and seeing the implications of their decisions, which is part of versatility. When I make this one decision, what other repercussions and ripples is it going to have throughout the organization? And are they going to be positive or negative? Because there will be ripples.
Right.
And sometimes waves and sometimes tsunamis.
Sure.
Exactly.
So you better see what's coming before you jump in.
Right. No, for sure. So if you're listening to this, I mean, adaptability, from what Leigh and David are saying, is one of the most important things you can have in a business. And if you're coaching or a culture champion, to be able to talk about that and understand what adaptability is, I believe, a lot of what we talk about on this podcast and and what Potentia does has to do with adaptability, because it doesn't matter if you're doing a disc assessment. If you're just going to say, okay, screw it, I don't really care, and you're not adapting to what it's saying, like that's it's why are we here, right? So this is a good question. So I deal with this, so I'm selfishly asking you for my advice, but I know there's a lot of people thinking about this. Is, can you be too adaptable?
That's
Well, that's a great question. I'm
It
going
is
to
a great
jump on
question. You
that.
want it, Leigh, or do you want me to take it?
I'm jumping on that one and let you pick up there. It's understanding what is needed in the moment. That's the whole point about adaptability. And if you're taking a look at pace, for example, I could be moving too quickly, such as what David's talking about, what a lot of organizations are doing with AI. They're moving so fast, they're not giving people time to absorb and understand the implication and impact on the people, as David talked about.
Right.
Secondly, is there's a time also to move more quickly. A third piece that David talked about is there's a time actually to stop and to redirect. And again, as David was talking about, that has to do with the factors. If I am open and listening to the ideas coming from the people who are working for me, and I'm matching those up with what we had as expectations or put out there, and we're getting some clear data, and then I'm hearing other ways to approach it. And those make sense. And they're coming from actually the people doing the work. And that's
Right.
really the essence. And for David and I, when we think about it, is it coming from where the work's being done? If it's coming from the boss and they're not doing the work, the likelihood of them understanding actually what's going on in the day-to-day activity as they're trying to move something through the pipeline is very low. They're only going to know as much as who they are influenced by in that situation. And so the more that they can understand from the greater group, the better that they'll make better decisions. And that's what really, in my mind, makes a great leader, because they're caring and compassionate. They're going to be collaborative around what they're doing. They are going to have that foresight and vision. They're going to line that up, and they're going to bring people along
Right.
all the way. And it's that type of leader who is not looking for the praise for themselves. They're looking for everybody else to get the praise and the acceptance of the success.
I love
And
that.
to me, that's the hardest thing for a leader to do, is they should be the wag flag waver, not the receiver of the accolades. It should be everybody else getting that. And to me, that's a very highly adaptable leader. They get it. They understand it.
No, I love
So,
that.
Jason, I agree with everything Leigh said, and I'm going to respond as well with a little different tack that complements what he just said. Can you be too adaptable? No. Was that clear enough?
Yep.
Now, why would I say it's not? It's highly unlikely. I won't say it never, but it's highly unlikely that you're too adaptable, because adaptable means you're responding appropriately.
Hmm.
This comes back to understanding what it means. Now, what I get most common is, well, I think I'm too flexible and I'm being taken advantage of. Well, you're not adaptable if you're being taken advantage of, because if you're being taken advantage of, you see it coming. You
Right.
see what's going to happen, and you're going to redirect that, and you're going to protect yourselves and others. And so people say, well, if I become more flexible, I feel like that's just going to make me really nice, and people are just going to complain all the time, and I got to sit there and listen to them. Well,
Right.
that's not adaptable. Adaptable is someone comes to me and I'm open, they want and they feel comfortable coming to me, and they know I'm going to help redirect towards an all-win solution. So they win, I win, the company wins. I'm going to listen to them. We're going to explore together. We're going to build commitment. And that's an adaptable response. Not that if Leigh came to me that I listened to him moan and groan for 20 minutes and complain about his colleagues and the processes that he's got to implement and all these other things. It's not even flexible.
Right.
Flexibility is going to be open to that, redirect that productively towards something more effective. And remember, at the end of the day, it's about adaptability is about success and satisfaction too, as we talk about those two outcomes for individuals and organizations.
Right.
Flexibility is going to be more related to satisfaction, because that's the interpersonal component.
Right.
Not only, but more or primarily related to satisfaction. Whereas versatility, the ability to change effectively, is going to be more related to success.
Right.
So if we go all the way back to our biases, whether it's, DISC biases or adaptability biases or values biases, et cetera, they come back to those success and satisfaction as well. So we see the same thing playing out in capabilities, that some people will want to focus on more the hard side of adaptability and versatility only,
Right.
without realizing if I don't take people along, it doesn't matter if I have the right answer. I think we've said before, if you charge the hill by yourself, you're probably not going to get very far.
Right.
Okay. Versus that flexibility side where you're rallying the troops and make sure that everything's ready to go when we're going into battle, that we've got the ammunition we need. We've got the right strategy. We've got the right backup plan. We've got the supply chain. We've got all those other components lined up and ready to go. Right. It's a both and, it's not an either or.
For sure.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're hitting on it a little bit. And the next thing I want to talk about is the misunderstandings around adaptability. Because I think even from what you're talking about just in that little snippet, there is a lot of misconceptions around adaptability and what adaptability is, which we already kind of covered. But I think people think they're being adaptable. Maybe they're being flexible. Maybe it's versatility thing. But again, it's not talked about. And I don't think that it's very easy to, like, a lot of people may think something, but again, with assessments, with Potentia's help, like there's a lot of things that, like, the data is the data, right? Like the you can't really argue with it. I mean, I guess if you want to and you're that guy, sure, but like I mean, I believe that the best way to understand this and know this is the Potentia assessment. So what are some misunderstandings around it?
Well, let's take a look at the disc with adaptability. All right. So, if you think of a dominant director, right? And we've talked about this earlier, that they're all about getting results. They're all about trying to achieve the outcome. And you would think that would be the perfect style for organizational change,
Right.
right? Who wouldn't want somebody hard charging, willing to take risks and move? Well, if that individual is dictating and demanding and telling people what to do and not listening to others, there's no flexibility there. However, if I have a dominant director who's more willing to consider other views, now I have someone who's adaptable. And then and that's on the flexibility side. Now, if I have the same dominant director and learning to benefit to handle situations differently than the way they want to do them, so they get somebody's input instead of still driving down the path that they want to go, they've gotten input from other people and they recognize that that input is valuable, they'll do something about it. And that's for every style. It's slightly different. But what is most important is for the individual who's leading to recognize what their preference is and then understand that what is actually needed in the moment. And that's, to David's point, is my ability to pause in that moment and reflect, to say, I just heard Jason tell me something. I didn't like what I heard because I didn't get the answer I wanted. Right. I wanted to hear they made this much progress. And Jason told me that in order for that progress to happen, these three things need to take place for that really to occur. And I'm going, well, why haven't we done something about it? And Jason lets me know that, Leigh, you've told people not to do this. Now, right, what do I want to do at that point? I could, some individuals you would think would go, yeah, that's a great idea, Jason. Others would say, Jason, I want you to get out there and tell people to get it done this way.
Right.
So the lowest thing of rating that I think David and I've seen about adaptability strengths around leaders, when you take a look at what would be the lowest strength that you think leaders would have, if you're thinking about, confidence, approachable, respectful, collaborative, caring, seeking out others' input, what do you think might be the lowest strengths?
I would say maybe seeking others' input, because they're the leader for a reason.
Yeah, so that is definitely one. An individual, that leader thinks they're seeking input, but if you do a 360, the direct ports do not think that way.
Right.
And also collaboration.
Right.
They think they even know they're not collaborative. And their people confirm that. So
that's interesting.
And this is on research that David's done with Dr. O'Connor over the years of over 10,000 people. So I can already anticipate, and David can't, that the likelihood of somebody we're working with is going to be challenged to seek others' opinions. they're going to be challenged to be cooperative and collaborative, and they're going to be challenged to open to new ideas.
Right.
So you also asked, what are some of the mistakes or errors or thinking that's not real clear around adaptability? And I would go back to the first part, that it's both flexibility and versatility. And so it's two components, and there are multiple subcomponents to that. You can't simplify it into, are you open to change? Okay. And the other thing is that believing that you can fully understand your true adaptability without others' viewpoints. That's the thing I would say the most, because based on that research with more than 10,000 people, one thing is clear. We all think we're more adaptable than those around us we work with think we are. Okay. That was the most consistent finding on all 20 components of adaptability, whether flexibility or versatility. We think we're more adaptable than others do.
Right.
And so finding that out is really critical. I'm reminded of a gentleman that I was working with several years ago, and we were actually in a CEO group. And we all completed adaptability tools, and we were talking about the need for adaptability. And so his flexibility was very low. And his personal score was in the single digits.
Wow.
For adaptability. And so he looked at it, and he just, this was a group that knew each other well. So people kind of opened their reports and started looking. And he said, something's wrong with my report. And we're like, what's going on? And he said, look at this. That's really low. And we said, well, yes, but those were your own responses. He said, I'm actually really flexible. We said, oh, so you're open to others' ideas. We said, yeah. He said, but so are you open to the fact that maybe you're learning something about your flexibility right now? He's like, no, it's wrong.
That's what you're proving a point right now.
All the CEOs around him just burst out laughing and said, listen, you're one of the nicest people we know, but you are not flexible. We'll share some examples with you.
Right.
And so for him, that was a real awakening, in that in his head, he truly was open to others' perspectives, but outwardly, he liked to debate and challenge, and he was very smart. So he intimidated the heck out of the people around him. Mm-hmm. And so he was shutting down everyone around him. And because of that, no one believed him. Yes, you could convince him to change his mind, and he certainly would, but you really had to fight him tooth and nail, because that's just the way that he naturally operated. And until you did that, he wasn't confident that you truly believed it.
Right.
So that gap for him was monstrous. And to his credit, he took that to heart and made a lot of changes. And his team just was like, where did this guy come from? Later, to like what Leigh had said, before, you always knew what his style was, his core personality. As he became more adaptable, like we've seen in all of our experience in leadership and work with leaders, the more adaptable you become, the less people know what your core personality is.
Yeah. So with David's point on that, when many a time people ask David, what's your style? And David will ask the group, well, tell me what you think it is. And exactly what the group will say is, we can't figure it out. It seems like you're relational, but you like your detail, but you still get us to go on the mark, but you give us a little bit of time to think it through as a group. And that's always when, as an individual, when they cannot pick your style, but they can tell you your behavior at different points of time that was appropriate for the team or the individual or for the group.
Right.
And that's to me, the separator with Dr. O'Connor's work and what we're doing here at Potentia from anybody else.
Right.
It has set, and this, Jason, you and I've talked about this, even for yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And your intention is you're highly trusting, and you want to allow others to have the opportunity to do things. And what's happened to you when you haven't been really specific and clear to people about what your expectations are?
Not good things. They we talk about, I L5 everybody and everything's great. I mean, I'm literally dealing with a situation today. I was like looking at his sales in one of our retail stores, and I'm like, I think that I've let this guy kind of run a little bit, by himself, but he's doing the best I mean, he's doing a great job. He listens to this and he knows that, but like I could do a 10 times better job supporting him and helping him out. And I just haven't done it because I'm like, oh, he's got it. I'm trusting and which I'm definitely learning. The we's of life aren't the best for business.
Right.
So it's an unfavorable situation right now in that retail store, which is what I want to talk about is adaptability in favorable and unfavorable situations, because then that's why I love what you guys are doing, because I don't know if anybody ever talks about, or I've never heard of it before, comparing the two different favorable and unfavorable situations in a situation, right? And then what the adaptable, like, everything. So let's talk about that, because I think it's very important for listeners to understand.
Yeah.
ahead,
So
David.
the first thing I would encourage listeners to understand is realize that most of us, our adaptability is going to change in favorable versus unfavorable situations. It's not likely to be exactly the same. Now, as you increase your adaptability, that should come together. That should narrow, that you're always adaptable. But again, we talked about when times are tougher, a lot of times we go more to our more natural habits and preferences, not what we need to do. Right.
Right.
It's we can think about that with our spouses, right? Our spouse might ask us a question and we spout something out, a little too quickly when we know better than that, right?
Yep. Maybe.
Okay.
I don't know if I know better. No, just kidding. Yeah.
Over time, you'll grow in
Yep.
wisdom,
Yeah,
Jason.
for sure.
Okay, but we know better sometimes, right? But we're in a stress state, or we get uncomfortable, or we're struggling to get through something together. But that favorable and unfavorable, it's that recognition first. And now, when is it typically more important to be adaptable? Unfavorable.
Yeah.
Now, typically, I said, but not always. Why would that be the case? In the world of AI right now, is it possible that if you're not one of the first movers in your market, even though business could be good today, right? We might need to be building adaptable organizations and adaptable people within organizations.
Right.
And so it's very important in both environments. And it's interesting. So we use a lot of these tools when we're looking at hiring and looking at an individual that we've done some work with. And here's an interesting thing. Well, the pattern is we typically tend to be more adaptable and favorable when things are going well. That's not always the case. Some people become more adaptable when things aren't going well.
Correct.
Because they're just kind of going along and everything's fine. I don't really need to pay attention. Now all of a sudden everything's hit the fan and I've got to respond. It's like, oh, okay, I got to wake up. Okay.
I would say that's probably, as Leigh know, that's probably more my style is in favorable times. I'm less, I hate to say present, but like, I'm more of, working on different things. And then when times get tough, I definitely like, we're going into a war room and we're figuring out the problem and we're going to make it happen. And, that's again, what I'm doing in a situation just today. And I get frustrated at myself because I'm like, I should be doing this every single day. And then I don't have to stress myself out and think that the world's falling and, I'm going to lose a store, even though we're not. But like, I kind of like one extreme to the other instead of like more even kill. But like, I always feel like I self-sabotage myself because then I get like obsessed with figuring out the problem, which is probably a therapeutic thing that I need to figure out, not a personality trait, but it is what it is.
Well, let's add to that. You're talking about your being open to changing your approach from a favorable to an unfavorable situation. There are many individuals, and David's right, where I've seen that they're not open to changing their approach in a favorable situation. But as things get more unfavorable, just like you, they're more open to do that.
Right.
Now, if you know that about yourself and you're having some foresight and vision, which again is more around your versatility, around the situation that you're dealing with right now with this individual, you will know in the future that my approach needs to be different and put some structure in place versus just being open to what needs to be done, and have that a collaboration of how that structure should look, maybe with a little bit more direction than support, and then test it out and go back and check in on it. That, I think, your question, Jason, and responding to David's answer, I think is the biggest factor for me working with individuals is one, understanding their preference and their style in an unfavorable versus favorable situation, and their tendency around their adaptability in favorable, unfavorable situation. And then coming up with a solution with them that actually you can't have everybody work on everything that needs to happen. You have to decide what one or two factors would be significant for us to improve.
Right.
And then if that's the case, what does it look like? So what's the leading indicator of success? So let me ask you this. If you're going to be more successful the next time in this situation, what would be a leading indicator, which is usually more qualitative than quantitative, that you're being successful doing what you're doing, Jason, around your adaptability?
That's a great question. Probably more, I definitely need more structure, and I need to understand my team probably a little bit better. And I need to have regular check-ins, one-on-ones, and follow my system way better.
Yes. So what that would sound like from your team to let you know you're doing it well is, Jason, you showing up at the store or you showing up at the shop has been great because now I have more access to you.
Right.
And because of that, I'm more clear about what you need me to do.
Yeah, I definitely need to show up way more than I do.
Right.
I will admit
that's all measurable.
Right.
People think you got to get really fancy on what you measure. Just how are you getting feedback from others? What happens now when you walk in? Are people immediately gravitating to you, or are they walking away?
Right.
Well, they're gravitating to you because now you made yourself open and available to them.
Right.
It is not managing by walking around. That is not what David and I are talking about. We're going there with intention, and we're making sure that when we go there that we're asking the open-ended questions. We're trying to find out what's happening for them. But now I'm adapting myself. You're adapting yourself because your preference is to keep things going. Don't slow things down.
Right.
Well, let's take it a little slower and then we'll go faster.
Yeah. Yep. I just had this conversation yesterday with one of my guys. He's like, "You are the bottleneck. Stop being the bottleneck." I'm like,
yeah, that reminds me of one of my favorite quotes by Peter Drucker. I don't know, Jason. He wrote long before you were alive.
Yeah, no, I'm very familiar with him.
But a wonderful, great thinker for anyone who wants to learn how to be a great business thinker. Timeless principles and truths. But one of my favorite quotes of his is that the bottleneck is always at the top of the bottle.
Dang, okay, that is very true.
Right, pretty straightforward. Maybe just
That's
call
so true.
it like it is.
But even talking about with adaptability, I mean, if the organization wants to go somewhere or to do something, and you're the reason why they're not doing it, or if you're the quote unquote bottleneck, or you're the blocker, or, you're all those things, like it's true. I mean, I don't think that people realize, even if they're like a present owner, present CEO, present manager, or non-present, like how much their attitude and willingness and like even like affects the organization. And I mean, I love how we've been talking about this, earlier, is just, it does start from the top. And you're right. Like the bottleneck is always at the top of the bottle. I love that. I've heard that, but I haven't heard of it in a long time. I forgot about it. I love that. It's so true. And unfortunately, I've had to last, overnight, really thought about how I can make myself not the bottleneck. But again, like that's an unfavorable situation. I'm like, okay, we'll adapt. We'll do this. We'll do that. Like I just wish I would have, had those conversations weeks ago.
And Jason,
help our team a little better.
As we talk about adaptability too, in these different components, one of the great things to do is look around you and ask, who do I know who's adaptable? Who do I know that maybe has either struggled with that same issue or really excels in an area where I'm trying to become more adaptable and learn how to be more effective in those types of scenarios? And,
right.
You don't always need to have a formal assessment, though. Ours are a good place to start. It's my little
yes, they are.
Shameless plug.
Yes, they are.
But really to step aside and ask, who are those people, and approach them. What do you do? And particularly find someone who's your style, similar to your style, and say, hey, listen, how do you handle doing all the things that aren't fun? Right.
Right.
The pieces that the systems of processes, some of the stuff that you can get into them and you're good at them, but how do you discipline yourself? You always seem to show up differently. right?
Right.
Or at the right approach at the right time. How do you go about doing that?
Right.
So that's another great resource around us that we often forget about. And interestingly enough, there's some pretty decent research that says the most adaptable people in organizations are not on the leadership team in a lot of cases.
Right.
That's interesting.
And so looking around us to see who are those more adaptable people who just always seem to have the answer, just always seem to get it right. They'll oftentimes fly below the radar screen, but it's where everybody in the organization goes.
Right. No, that's a great self-assessment for sure. Yeah, that's a lot to think about. I love that. A big reason why we do things has a lot to do with success and satisfaction. Let's talk about that a little bit, because I know that, I mean, again, a lot of why we do things kind of comes back to success and satisfaction. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Can you say more about that?
When I'm becoming adaptable, what are some questions I can ask or think about? And how does success and satisfaction go hand in hand with being adaptable, having versatility, being flexible?
Well,
Because I think that a lot of success and satisfaction has to do with like why we do a lot of things. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, ultimately, success and sativation are a great measuring bar, right? So let's say that you decided I'm going to work on my versatility, and I'm going to work on having more foresight and vision, so seeing things before they come, so I don't have to fall into this pattern of unfavorable, and then I get energized and I solve the problem, right? So the ultimate question is for adaptability is, am I seeing the success? Is my foresight getting better? Okay, so am I seeing more of that success? And am I also doing so in a way where myself and others are satisfied in the way that I'm doing that?
Okay.
Now, that doesn't mean you have to love every way you can do that, but part of that satisfaction could be it's fulfilling. I now know how to get more from my team earlier so that I can see things sooner. And that's meaningful. I don't necessarily love slowing down and listening and drawing that out as much, but it's meaningful and it has purpose for me. So it is satisfying in many ways. So, and if I'm not adapting in a way that's leading to more success and satisfaction for myself and for those around me in my organization, then I'm not fully adapting.
Right.
Okay. Just like if our adaptability changes in favorable or unfavorable, what that tells us is we still have some more adapting to do.
Right.
Okay. We're not fully there, because if you're fully adaptable, you're adapting at all times.
For sure. No, I think that's a great way to measure it. Another great way to measure it is, the assessment that we're talking about. Shout out. But I also think like I don't know, I'm a little bit, biased when it comes to it, but I just think it changes so much when you have the assessment, when you talk about it, and you can coach from the quote unquote data. Because I always say, like, data doesn't lie, especially if you're, which I want to talk about is like, we have talked about a little bit, is like the assessments and how we measure, which we kind of just talked about a little bit, but then the self and observers or others, on how you view yourself, they view you. And like, honestly, like when we talk about measuring, like the only way that I know of, and maybe you can talk about this a little bit, is those assessments and taking them and then coaching off them and then working, being adaptable when it comes to the assessments and moving the organization forward through, understanding, each other.
Well, if we look at the assessment from a self standpoint, and David talked about it earlier, Jason, when he was talking about that individual who didn't realize how low they were in flexibility. They thought they were very flexible. One of the most important things that the assessment can do, especially as a consultant or internal consultant for a company, is first self-validating the report with the individual. You heard very early on in these episodes, David and I are not stuck on you said this, so you must be that.
Right.
It is, let's talk about a situation where, for example, you're in a favorable situation and you're low on being neutral and objective toward others around what needs to be done.
Right.
Can you give me an example of what that might look like? And did that happen recently? You would ask those types of questions. And that's what this report will allow me to do and David to do. It also will say, well, what would you do differently? Now that you we've talked about this. What did you learn? Is there, and to David's point, which I liked, is there somebody that actually you see that is very open and objective and more neutral around a situation? And oh yeah, I watch Jason, the way he all of a sudden pauses and he will reframe the statement to say, hey, gee, I think, David, that I heard this, 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 and this. Do I have that right? And so you get into confirming. And a lot of times it's not about having the right answer. It's having a dialogue to help the individual explore the best approach for them.
Right.
And then at the end of it, coming to an understanding to say, all right, so how are we going to go forward on this? What's the plan? When we get together next time, what should that look like? And
Right.
again, it's incremental. It's not something that gets done overnight. The individuals that I find, and I have one to share, I mean, this must, back in, around 2010 or so, this individual ran a major part of a corporation and he was in the IT side of the business. And he was a major controller of everything. His hand had to be on everything. He did the adaptability assessment. He took a look at it and he also had a 360 done. And he was being shown as being very low on flexibility. People thought he had versatility, but he just wasn't appearing willing to change. Go forward 10 years. I worked with him for over 10 years.
Wow.
People could no longer tell his style. He was able to ask amazing probing questions. He moved his part of the organization faster than anybody else ever had. And his people were, when you did employee satisfaction, high scores across the board. But
Wow.
he intentionally made those changes over time. And at the
That's
end
incredible.
of it, he was very grateful that he was able to go through the process and learn about what to do in such a way that he mentored and coached some of the top leaders that exist there today. But it started with him taking the assessment, like you asked about earlier, recognizing a major gap, being willing to understand that gap needed to be closed, and he closed it.
Wow.
But it didn't come without him getting feedback, asking for feedback, thanking people for feedback, and then doing something about it.
That's incredible. I mean, it sounds like a guy, like, I mean, it's from the, jump, he might have, on paper, and even people's assessment with the adaptability, but then, for someone to even have the kind of that low adaptability, but then he's like, yeah, like, a willingness to change, I think is huge. And I mean, I think that's big in leadership. I think people, like I always say, like, a spade's a spade. If I don't know, I mean, I used to have people on my team, Leigh, and you worked with them.
Mm-hmm.
They were not highly, looked at by others. They loved themselves, but others they're a little abrasive, and they were, but understanding those assessments and them willing to change, I think was huge, and it helped our company a ton. One thing I want to talk about too with that is the team reports, because I think that an individual can only go so far. It's the team. And I think that it's very interesting. And I want to talk about the potential reports of the team reports and what they mean and how we can utilize them as a company. And then even as a coach coaching.
Well, when you get into change in an organization or innovation or strategic response development, really just effective teams, you need to look into adaptability and what are the dynamics between the members. Because so often what can happen is one or two individuals with lower adaptability cause the entire gears to grind in a leadership team. Right. And so that's often because there's not the senior leader knows how to work through that, is not adaptable enough to how do I move this person off center. And therefore one or two people, or the dynamics between a couple people in a team can cause lots of challenges.
Right.
And so, but in times of change, ambiguity, uncertainty, etc., you really need to have adaptability, and understanding where you're strong and where you're not is important. I'm looking here at a team I worked with a while ago, and it was interesting. So when it came to themselves, 5 of 8 thought they were higher flexibility, But when they evaluated each other's flexibility in a group, guess what? 5 of 8 said you're not flexible at all. They were in the lower range.
Wow.
So you've got almost 2/3 of this group that are highly viewing each other as highly inflexible, but thinking I'm flexible, but those other turkeys are not.
Right.
How do you think that was going to go over?
Right.
It's no wonder they were calling us in for some extra help, right? And saying what's going on. Okay. And so, that's a great example of putting those team dynamics together. And then oftentimes in looking at those sub factors, we can say, oh, here's really one place to start as a team. And as Leigh said, a lot of times we just share the data and say, based on these areas, what do you all think? Which would be most important to start there? Let's have a conversation around that.
Right.
And they'll commit to an area that almost always moves the needle if you provide that follow-up support and give them the tools.
Right. No, I think it's so interesting.
By the way, that was a group of 8 people leading a major reorganization and change initiative in the organization. And so, this was only their third or fourth attempt in the last 10 years. I wonder why.
Right. That's fascinating. I love it.
Well, the other part to build on David's point is it gives the group a conversation, right? So one of the things that we avoid, because it's neither David or I feel it's valuable, is to single any individual out within the group. And, to use a quote that David had used before, but one that I like is William Stafford. If the organization is not fulfilling the change that they need to do, I look to the team. And William Stafford said, the system is designed to perfectly get the results it gets. So if it's not working, who built the system?
Right.
Now I'm working with a whole group of executives. They designed the system.
Right.
So then you have to take a look at inwardly. So if the system's not working, it's not the people below you. It's you up here who have decided this is the way you want something to operate. And so there was a team recently, a very large group, around 20. And they had in favorable high flexibility, and in favorable they had high versatility. In unfavorable, their flexibility was very low and versatility was even lower, in charge of a major initiative. And one of the things we then did is say, it was very eye-opening. The other thing is they have an amazing leader. He's the first one to acknowledge where he needs to develop and then talk about areas that he's observing within the group. So he brings out, like David had mentioned earlier, he's built that trust and rapport with the team, so they're willing to share more openly because he's done that. He's spent the time.
Right.
It was an amazing discussion. One of the individuals goes, yeah, I guess I could see myself doing that. And everybody else in the room laughed.
Yep.
See, you're doing that. You're doing it right now. So again, that's the other part that you want to do is balance the seriousness, because this is serious work, because we're engaging in how we're dealing with other people's lives. But at the same time, we have to be able to be willing to take a laugh at ourselves and recognize this is how we can move forward. And when you get a team, I think that for me, and I know for David, there's nothing more satisfying than watching a team become more open with each other, more vulnerable, recognizing that it's done together, not by myself, but with everybody pulling in the same way. It's exciting to watch each individual change and the willingness to share what they feel that they need to do to help the team succeed.
Right. I mean, I've witnessed that in, my own companies, is people get really excited about it, as well as, some clients where, we instilled a couple of these things and now they're just a big organization of collaboration, sharing, created an environment where it's okay to question things, okay to ask questions. It's okay, like, get on the same page and get in a line. I think that's huge. I mean, I think that when companies are all over the place, they're misaligned and no one knows what's going on. They're not adapting to change. Is change going to happen? Is change not going to happen? All these things. I think that, it's especially right now, like we are in an unfavorable economy where, I guess depending on industry, but I would say, the economy for the most part is unfavorable economy. We have unfavorable situations with AI that it's changing every day. Like over the weekend, one of the most popular ones, and now everybody's going to another one. Like we're going back and forth. Like, I've already downloaded it. I'm like, I have like 17 subscriptions to different things. Like, what do I use? Right. So it's just, but being intentional with those decisions, I think is the most important part. Like you're saying, in collaborating and making sure the organization knows where they're going. And also a little bit of like making the decision, sticking with that decision. But if you have to be adaptable because something changes on the way, yeah. But like, that's what I get myself into is I make a decision and then I'm going, oh, here, then I'm going there, and then I'm going here, and then I'm going there. And I'm all over the place. And so I need to take a look at, myself in a lot of these situations. So thank you. I know we're wrapping up on time. Leigh, David, thank you so much for this episode. I've really, really enjoyed it. This is one of my favorite subjects. I think it's very important, especially right now in the world that we're in. I think it's very relevant. So again, thank you for being on the show.
Great to be here again, Jason.
So on the assessment side, I want to shout that out. The assessments, Potentia.solutions is the website. Am I correct, right?
That will work. Yes, it will.
Yes.
Okay. So Potentia.solutions, the unbelievable assessments on there. If you want, hit me up if you have any questions. Jason Hogan on Instagram.
How about we do this, Jason? They just listened to an entire session about adaptability. So how about we give 100 away?
Let's do it.
Anyone interested in taking that assessment, find out how adaptable you all are out there. We can maybe even report back on what we found.
Okay. Yeah, let's do it. So you heard it from them, 100 assessments for free. That's awesome. We will post that everywhere and we'll make sure that everybody gets, first 100 free. So thank you so much. If you like this episode, please share it. Share it with your team. This is amazing. And we'll see you all on the next episode of Culture Camp. Thank you.
Take care.